to ensure workers receive their monies on time. And I think, Chair, we need to see a package of support for embattled businesses and sectors of the economy from the state and from the banks. And we welcome the Minister's commitment in that regard. Chair, I think we want to welcome the Treasury's commitment to releasing a policy paper in the next few days or week on our proposal to allow highly indebted or distressed workers limited access to the pension funds. We want to appreciate the Minister's commitment to table amendment bill in February with the budget speech to provide for that. So the proposal really is just to make sure that does happen in November, the policy paper is released, and that the bill does come to Parliament with the budget in February. But it should include both public and private workers who are both equally stressed. Yes, public servants might be having their jobs and getting paid, but they are also highly indebted and supporting increasing numbers of relatives who are unemployed, etc. On the COVID-19 SRD grant, we want to appreciate it. It's provided relief to millions of the unemployed. Judging by the queues of the post office, you can see people value it. But I think we also want to say, Comrade Chair, that those recipients are not going to find work miraculously in March. Our proposals is one, to extend it beyond March, to see how can we increase it to the food poverty line. The payments must be moved to electronic payments for all recipients, so you don't have these queues. But we think, in essence, Chair, it's a foundation for a BIG. Chair, we want to really welcome the 500 billion rand over the next 3 years and the 100 billion rand over the decade for the infrastructure investments. That's a critical jolt to the economy. We want to support the proposed amendment of Regulation 28 to allow pension funds the right to choose to invest in infrastructure. This is also going to help inject liquidity into the economy or stimulus. Chair, proposal one is to accelerate the infrastructure program to see how can we expand localization of construction materials, as Treasury had correctly done with cement. So can we include machinery, steel, etc., and to finalize Regulation 28 amendment by the end of the year. Chair, on the public service wage, but we don't think it's correct to compare public service, which is doctors and nurses and teachers and police officers, who largely don't exist in the private sector, versus the private sector where they pay farm workers and domestic workers what is often amounting to a slave wage. And it doesn't hide, it distorts when you look at it, because you don't include the wage gap between the CEOs and the ordinary cleaners. But I think on the wage bill, Comrade Chair, the critical points is one is for government to respect collective bargaining, to engage the bargaining councils on issues of collective agreements, the wage bill, and to honor agreements when they sign them. We think there is ways to assist government. You could have a single collective bargaining process for the entire state, a single wage regime. So you include the SOEs, the entities, etc. But also, Chair, we need to cut the fat on top if you expect those in the bottom to tighten their already very tight belts. So can we have wage caps for the senior managers in the SOEs and entities? Can we have a 25% package cut for politicians, the ministers, the senior management across the state, but even a reduction in the headcount? You don't need 34 deputy ministers, for example. Can we slash the ministerial handbooks, excessive perks? For example, flights for the spouses of ministers. And I think also critically, Comrade Chair, is to reverse the very worrying headcount reductions for the police and teachers. Chair, on the issue of corruption, wasteful expenditure, the MTPS was very thin on details. So I want to propose again to extend the ban on politicians doing business with the state to include the leadership of ruling parties, as well as the spouses and children of domestic or politically influential persons. We need to also give additional resources to tackle corruption to the NPA, to SAPS, to the courts. I think to empower SARS to conduct lifestyle audits. And also, amazingly, Chair, it hasn't happened yet, but to implement the blacklisting of delinquent companies from state tenders. On public procurement, Committee Chair, we want to welcome the announcement that the bill will be ready soon. But I think we hope it needs to be strengthened significantly so that we have a single online transparent public procurement system for the entire state, not just the public service departments. This can be critical to also help support the designation of locally produced goods, the centralized procurement of certain large-scale items like medicines and textbooks, vehicles. But we also need, Chair, to really enforce the 30-day payment rule and to make sure we do that methodically. On the revenue front, Comrade Chair, just getting towards the end, I think we must really commend the good work done by SARS to rebuild its capacity. We would want to see additional resources being given to it to continue that good work to help them to tackle tax evasion, but it needs to come with a plan to enforce customs duties collections. We'd want to urge Treasury to look further how to reduce tax loopholes and to consider increasing taxes on the wealthy through high income taxes for those earning above 1.5 million, inheritance and estate duties, and duties on luxury imports. And of course, we would hope one day to see a new funding model for the Gauteng freeways. Chair, it's quite worrying how thin on details the MTPS is around SOEs. So we want to propose at least, can we accelerate the measures of support given to Eskom, bring forward the additional generation capacity timeframes, but we really need a clear plans around how to stabilize, rebuild, reposition our SOEs, which are literally hanging by a thread, including jobs plans for those workers besides just simply retrenching them. And in particular, the key ones, Transnet, PRASA, the Post Office, SAA, Mango, etc. Chair, would want to propose that the Road Accident Fund and RABS bills, which were rejected by the previous Parliament, be brought back to Parliament. We can't afford the RAF to continue on this trajectory. But also, Committee Chair, that 2 years ago, government promised a new fuel policy regime paper. It is yet to come, but we need to come with a new regime which is more affordable to the economy. Again, Chair, that we all know the AG's reports on the working condition of municipalities. Yet those very thin details on the MTPS, what is government's plans to fix it? We really hope to see clear proposals about stabilizing, rebuilding these municipalities and a roadmap to move towards district development model. So Chair, just getting to the end, I think just quickly on the appropriations aspect, we are quite worried about the cuts to health and police, given their critical role, but also more critically, the cuts to social security by 17%. I think we also need to highlight the failure of basic education to meet 80% of the school sanitation target. And I would propose, Committee Chair, that we see how can we reverse the frontline service delivery cuts, which are really hitting the CCMA health and education, also the DTI industrial financing programs, and of course, a 350 grant for SASA. So I think in conclusion, Comrade Chair, we'll really hope in February that a budget would be tabled, which will look at stimulating the economy and supporting job creation, providing relief to the unemployed, really tackling corruption and wasteful expenditure, helping to rebuild the state and SOEs, but of course also to respect collective bargaining. I think lastly, Committee Chair, as we all know from the election results, workers and voters are really rapidly losing faith in the government's commitments and policies, and we need to wake up fast. We're simply running out of time. But thanks very much, Committee Chair, I'm done.
Are you? Okay, I was going to be generous with you as well. No, it's fine if you're done. Thank you. Thank you, Kosatu.
Hi, Chair, your mic is off.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. I was just saying that we are through with these presentations and we just want to call upon members to make comments, ask questions, and if necessary, give advice. Honorable members. I'm looking at the Honorable Willie Ockham and Dennis Ryder in that order for now. Over to you, Honorable members.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, allow me to thank the presenters of these presentations that was done now. If you look at OUTA and of the presentation that Dr. Smulders did for us, I would really like to thank you for the honest way in which you have described what we all know the problems are. I'm going to be very brief because I agree with most of what you've said in any case. I think what we learned out of this again is the importance of oversight management and of consequence management. We know that we've got a bloated State Department. We've got a lot of employees earning a big amount of salaries every month. Dr. Smulders compared it to the private sector, and we could see that it is totally bloated there. So we need to have consequence management. If you look at the Auditor General's report that comes out every year, it really paints a bleak picture of what's going on. But still, every year we don't see anything happening to those people. We are just carrying on and doing the same things and expecting different results. So I want to compliment the presentations for that, and I want to urge this committee that we really get to a point where we can fully expect from our government departments to start to implement consequence management. Without it, we will not achieve what we are set out to do. Without consequence management, we will not be able to get a budget that will reach its targets and get service delivery out there to the people. We can carry on a lot about all the other stuff that was mentioned in their proposals, but that is where I want to stop my comment. It's just that without consequence management, we will not achieve anything. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Ocamp. Honorable Ryder.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chair, yeah, I do also want to appreciate the inputs, not only from these three presenters, but from everyone that's presented today. I think that we, yeah, the effort that's gone into all of the presentations is appreciated. And I wish that these organizations could be more appreciated by the general population for the time and effort they put into these analyses. From outer, yeah, thank you. I think that you spoke a little bit about local government that I want to pick on. And, you know, I think that you spoke about Section 139 and provinces having a bigger role in trying to fix what we've seen is a very broken system of local government. But you know, I want to challenge you, Ata, and maybe say, you know, Section 139, provinces are not the silver bullet, because we see in situations like in the Northwest, where Section 139 has been put in place substantially and hasn't had an impact. We see in situations in Gauteng, like, and my favorite bugbear is Mfuleni, where Mfuleni municipality has been under provincial administration and has in fact regressed. So, you know, I know we had a long discussion as a National Council of Provinces about Section 139 at the beginning of this year. And I think that the biggest finding that we had there was the fact that there's no supporting legislation, which is called for in terms of Section 1398. And that legislation has never been finalized. Perhaps you can just give us some, or you can respond to my issue about provinces being as much of a problem as they are part of the solution. And then, of course, I don't think that you mentioned the National Culture Department as part of the problem. And I mean, we had the Deputy Minister of COGTA on record just before the local government elections saying that she was shocked and surprised to hear that I think it was 62% of councillors can't use a computer. Now, I mean, the way our local government works, I can understand at the beginning of a term that many councillors who've been elected by their communities to represent their communities will not know how to use a computer. But, you know, it's a failure of COGTA itself that by the end of the term, those councillors still don't know. And to have that minister, that deputy minister coming on record and saying, well, you know, this is disgusting, that it's her own department that is the failure. And I think that National COGTA should be shielding the responsibility for these election results because of the fact that they haven't managed to you know, bring local government into a space where it's actually starting to function. So yeah, I didn't see much mention of that. And of course, the risk that this brings. Now, I spoke last night, honourable members, I spoke about the risks that had not been identified by the FFC and by the PBO, but the substantial risk that the failure of local government poses to South Africa and to our economy. And I mean, that was brought home again today by Arta's presentation when they spoke about the number of municipalities that are not actually paying their ESCOM bills. The matter of e-tolls, well, I don't know. I applaud Outer for continuing on this fight. You know, I'm almost ready to give up on trying to get a resolution on e-tolls. We were promised an answer by Minister Fikile Mbalula, in a presentation to the NCOP. He promised us an answer within 2 weeks. That was in March. And yeah, we still don't have any clarity on that, but well done to Outer for continuing to beat that particular drum. Saika, I think that, as always, an excellent presentation, highlighting some of the big issues. The one I want to pick on is crime, and the fact of resourcing police, but just to maybe emphasize the point that the resources need to find their way down to the front line of crime fighting, and not necessarily be spent on propping up the top heavy structure that we're finding in SAPS at the moment. Yeah, and then maybe to add to what you were saying, and so, you know, perhaps the detective, we had, I think 2019 was the year of the detective. It was declared the year of the detective, and that had absolutely no impact on what we see on the ground. And I think investment in the detectives is long overdue, to act as a means of making sure that people are brought to book and receive the appropriate consequence management that we keep talking about. Cool. Ceilings on expenditure, I enjoyed that. And then the other point that I wanted to harp on about is the fact that Saka indicated the fact that targets are not met. And I think that as government or as parliament, we often look to see, you know, which departments are spending 95% plus of their budgets and so on, and you know, we congratulate departments who are able to spend all their money. What we don't do, what we consistently fail to do, and something that I've been talking about for quite some time, is the fact that a department spending its budget is not good enough on its own. A department spending its budget and meeting its targets, that's what we need to start evaluating, is if you've spent the money, have you met the targets? If you haven't met your targets, why on earth did you spend the money, and what did you spend it on? What have you been doing in order to do that? Water and sewerage, I think you highlighted as well, which obviously is one of my particular interests as well. The fact that there's insufficient budget, you highlighted, and I think we've seen that certainly in the Vaal area, my home area, and the fact that there's a massive amount of 11 billion required there to fix the system, but it's just not coming. But yeah, I wonder if even if we had the money, if we've got the capacity in government to spend that money effectively. Kasatu, Mr. Parks, as usual, I agree with most of your conclusions. I don't agree with the way you got to all of them. I think that you hold a slightly outdated view about the difference between government salaries and private sector salaries. I think maybe you should go and update your homework on that one a little bit. I think that government employees are paid much better than private sector at this stage. Head count in SAPs and teachers. I think we really are targeting the wrong groups. Those are the people that we should be growing, bringing down crime now, and improving our education system. These are the things that are going to lead to growing our economy going forward. But yeah, I think your conclusions were all spot on. So thank you very much for that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Honorable Ryder. Any other member who wants to get in at the last minute? Okay. In the absence of members' hands, can we see who from the presenters want to respond first? Can you raise your digital hand, please, so that I can be able to recognize you, so that we finish the discussion. I think the members spoke to, okay, Sharon, you'll come first. Matthew second. Okay, Matthew second, and then Matt Johnston. I hope I have it right. Sharon?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the questions. Honourable Rider, you're spot on with the accountability. I think that is absolutely critical going forward, and I think the only way that we're going to do that is if we do this more regularly. Unfortunately, 6 months down the line is a bit too late. Things have happened. Ensuring that targets are met on a quarterly basis is needed. So that might not be your role, but you need to push that is happening. And if it's happening, it's not been effective, and that then needs to be addressed. But on the compensation side, I mean, I agree 100%, and that's why we said we need to have a review of the compensation, because we need people on the ground. We don't have sufficiently trained people on the ground to perform the services that we need. Of huge concern is that the police department, I read yesterday, lost over 5,000 people just between last year and this year. And that might be the problem for the issues that we had with the riots, but we really need to fix that urgently. And for me, again, the water is absolutely critical. Electricity is one thing, but with water, until we fix that whole ecosystem, and it starts one little bit at a time, from the ground up, and checking that the things that are happening. I mean, if we look at the post office, they reached 6 out of 17 of their targets, according to their annual report. And they're not the only one. I mean, it's highlighted in the Auditor General report. We need to make sure that these people are held accountable, and there must be reasons why these things have not, targets have not been met, etc. But crime, water, electricity, and the oversight overall, my biggest request is that, we need to start with the financial side, because if you don't have the finances in place, nothing else will work. Yes, we need the expertise, etc. But if you don't have the money to pay the expertise, we're going to lose the expertise. So on the grounds, particularly local government, we need to make sure that the people tasked with managing the budgets are suitably qualified and have the appropriate skills to be able to do that, because that is the cornerstone and the starting point for any of the departments meeting their targets. So I think that's where we need to start, make sure that the finance departments are suitably qualified and have the necessary expertise to guide that department with the funds that have been allocated to them. And then obviously from there flows the consequence management for the targets. But yeah, I think that's it from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sharon. Matthew Parks first, then Matt Johnson.
Sure. No, thanks, Comrade Chair. No, it's always confusing when more than one person is allowed to have the name Matthew. It causes endless confusion. I think, Comrade Chair, just to think to the two honourable members, Honourable Okamba and Ryder, I mean, I think they raised both concerns around the wage bill. So on the issue, is it bloated? Well, look, I mean, just to give you one set of stats, in 1994, we had about 34 million South Africans and about 1 million public servants. Today, we have about 60 million South Africans, so nearly almost double population, but the public service headcount is about 1.3 million. And in fact, we're seeing many instances around health, education, etc., where the ratio is declining at alarming levels. So in schools, is causing a higher teacher-learner ratio. We saw in the police force, where in the budget it says it's going to cut it by about 6,000 police officers, yet our population is rising and our crime levels are significantly high. So we don't agree with that. I think where we've really seen growth, which we don't support, is a growth at management level, at policy level. We think that needs to be redeployed and shifted to frontline service delivery level. But also, Comrade Chair, if you go to Home Affairs, you'll see queues, not because civil servants are slow, but queues often because they don't have sufficient staff on duty. Instead of having 6 staff on duty, they might only have 2 staff on duty, in addition to the IT system not working properly, etc. Chair, I think why we say it's difficult to compare apples to oranges is that in the public service, you have largely professionals. So you have 70,000 plus nurses, about 30,000 doctors. You have about 350,000 teachers. So these are people with degrees, etc. Sort of much higher proportion than the average population, the average workforce, which wouldn't have as many professionals. But also, if you want to compare them, well, then let's compare what the nurse or the doctor makes in the public service compared to what they make in the private sector. And you'll see the public sector actually falls behind the private sector for those professionals. And that's why you see constantly a brain drain of skilled public servants going to the private sector, be they teachers or going to the Middle East, to New Zealand, to Europe, to Canada, if they're health professionals. And that really is causing a huge problem at quite an alarming rate. Chair, I think also that in the private sector, you're including 800,000 domestic workers, you're including 800,000 farm workers, you're including construction workers, mine workers, etc. And these are professions which you don't have in the public service. So I think we need to really compare apples to apples. Equally, Comrade Chair, a police constable earns under 200,000 Rand a year. If you look at throughout the police ranks, the pay is actually quite low. Now we expect them to compete against criminals who are well-resourced, who are easily able to attempt them with bribes. Same thing with correctional services. So I think we need to have a much more nuanced approach to it. I think also, Chair, we need to have a broader discussion, just last 2 points, around the wage gap. In the public service, it's about 13-1 between what a cleaner earns at the bottom and what a DG earns on top. In the private sector, it's about 3 times that. We need to have a discussion that is it correct for publicly listed companies, like in the retail sector or the mining sector, where the CEOs make 100 million Rand a year and the cleaner makes 60,000 Rand a year, for example. And there is a companies bill, which we hope the DA would support, which now will require large listed companies to begin to disclose the wage gap as a way of trying to address this apartheid legacy. Chair, I think lastly, we are very sensitive to government's fiscal constraints. We can't be blind to it. If government is forced to default, to go to the IMF, it would be workers, including the public service, who would pay a very heavy price. So hence we've said there are some ways to assist government. Have a single wage regime for the entire state, a single collective bargaining process for the entire state. Put caps on what management earns in the SOEs and the entities, where often it's higher than what the president earns. Let's see if we can redeploy staff to frontline posts. How can we consolidate duplicate entities or duplicate SOEs or even municipalities? So there are ways to assist, but it just requires government to engage with labor and see how can we assist protecting lower middle income earners, workers from inflation, but also how to stabilize and to save the state. And that's why also, Comrade Chair, lastly, we focus on how can we assist SARS, how can we tackle corruption, how can we grow the economy, because these all issues require nuanced, holistic approach, and not simply to think that if we pay nurses less, we'll resolve our myriad of problems, and we won't. In fact, it might make it worse. But thanks very much, Comrade Chair, honorable members.
Thanks, Matt. We'll now have Matt Johnston, followed by Helen. I think it's Helen or Henny Swanepoel, in that order.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you for the questions from the honorable members. You did get my name correctly. And it's not Matthew, it's just Matt. Chair, to comment firstly on what was said about oversight and consequence management.
Oh, I thought Matt was a nickname, or just a nickname short for Matthew. I'm sorry for that.
No problem, Chair. It's a common mistake.
Okay.
Okay. To say we very much agree with the need for oversight and consequence management. And this is something that we've been saying over and over, Chair. I just want to comment on some of the silence from members, because there were very few questions and comments, although those are appreciated. Before, when we came to these forums, there would be a lot of disagreement with some of the things we say. And there's not so much disagreement today, and I take that as agreement, even if it's tacit. And I think we really hope to see reflected in your report, Chair, from this public hearing, the comments that are made here, and hopefully that agreement that I'm seeing is real. And we really hope to see a substantive response from National Treasury as well. In terms of the oversight and consequence management, I think it's important to say that we do see a big role for National Treasury to play. There are certain provisions in the MFMA, in the PFMA, that we believe are not being implemented. Blacklisting is an example. But there are various ways, according to the legislation, where money that is misspent, that is wasted, or that is stolen as a result of the wrong people being in positions of procurement decision-making, that money could be clawed back, and we don't see those things being implemented. But also, we really think there's an important role for civil society to play. Honorable members, I want to say, in response to you, Honorable Ryder, and the comments on local government, I think I want to make it very clear, I don't want to be misunderstood. As far as provinces in Section 139 is concerned, I agree. It's not a silver bullet, and that's sort of the point I was trying to make. Northwest is a good example. My family live there, and basic service delivery does not happen. So people are really struggling, and businesses are struggling in particular. It's an enormous issue, and the provinces that have taken control of certain municipalities really are not doing what they are supposed to be doing. And in that, I believe, and we're working towards this, we're trying as civil society to invest in solutions where communities can help themselves. There's a lot of despair, there's a lot of despondency about government's willingness or ability to fix the problems that it has to a large part allowed to happen. So matters are being taken into communities' own hands, and we saw that in response to the unrest. And this is why when more money is allocated to the police and to the Defense Department, it has to be questioned. If more money is allocated to healthcare and to education, like some of the other presenters said, it has to be questioned whether that additional allocation will really make a difference. Will it really precipitate in more service delivery that people can see and feel? And at the moment, it does not seem as if that will happen. I want to agree that National COCTA has not played its role. We think the government in general has not played its role. Parliament has arguably not played its role either, and there's a big role to play. Chairperson, honorable members, not only in this committee, but in others, and in previous sessions like this, we've recommended that there's more collaboration between portfolio committees and these standing committees and select committees to deal with these problems in a way that SCOPA, for example, really has. That's one committee and they have limitations, but they have intervened in certain levels, in certain places where local government has absolutely collapsed. And that's welcome. We would really like for civil society to be part of that solution, and that's why we recommend that the budgets and how money is spent at local government be more transparent, be more inclusive, that people on the ground in these communities, some of whom really have some expertise to bring to the table, that they can participate and try and inform and enrich the budgeting process, which at the moment is really not changing in reaction to the fact that the expenditure is not equating service delivery outcomes. So I want to emphasize that. And in terms of e-tolls, yes, many promises have been made, and I think we are saying the same as COSATU is saying, as the Gauteng province is saying. It is virtually only cabinet that is not willing to make a decision and accept the sunk costs of a failed scheme. And I don't think, Honorable Ryder, that the praise should come to OUTA or to any organization. It should come to the people of Gauteng and the motorists on that road who refuse to submit themselves to a system that they did not agree to, that they not sign up for. And government needs to accept this. The figures are very much reflecting this. Sunral seems to be accepting this. And so I think it's really incumbent on this committee, who've heard several times from us that this is a failed scheme that needs to be resolved. This committee can go to cabinet, can make recommendations to Treasury, that plans for alternative funding and an alternative funding policy be urgently put forward. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you again to all the members for the opportunity and questions.
Okay, Sonepal, please, can you take the step?
Thank you, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members. Just apologies from my side for earlier telecoms fibre left me in the lurch this morning, but I drove to another spot to just quickly respond. Firstly, I think from our side, just to express appreciation for all the inputs and presentations that were made. I think there are critically important issues raised there that should form part of the budget discussions. Just to note, the Treasury usually does not respond in detail to the presentations during the sessions on the day. We have got a scheduled time frame on Friday where the Treasury will respond to all the issues. But be assured, we have taken detailed note of all of issues raised, and we will make sure that we respond to those in detail on Friday. Honorable Chair, on your question regarding the social grants, I agree with your comment earlier that this is a discussion that needs to be taken to a higher level. The grants issue is a very emotive issue that is close to the heart of every South African. But what we must realize is that changes in spending will result in very large increases in total expenditure numbers, and that must be considered in a sensible way. I think we need to think of the grants in the context of our broader social spending and the total social wage, which, as Honourable Karim pointed out, at this point in time forms a very large portion of government spending. But we should also then consider that in light of the size of government debt and how we've got to deal with that going forward. But I don't want to get into detail on those issues at this point in time. I think there must be a discussion that will deal with the grants issue specifically. We will make sure that the Treasury then responds to all the issues that's within our purview in our time slot on Friday. Thank you very much, Honourable Chair.
Okay, Mr. Swanepoel, are you representing Treasury, if I may ask?
Yes, ma'am. Apologies, I should have just introduced. I'm in the budget office, in the office of the DDG, of the budget office. So Mr. Edgar Shishi will be responding to all the questions then on Friday, as we have noted and informed him. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to correct the area that says they might not be able to address everything, they must make an attempt to do that. Otherwise, there is also a way of combining the issues that have been raised, as you could hear that the stakeholders agree in some areas and in some broad areas. For example, the issue of consequence management is an issue that cuts across and can be dealt with sufficiently, as has been raised by all the stakeholders, almost. Secondly, there is an issue on the participation of other government departments. I saw Honorable Ryder also wrote here in the chats about the role that Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation Department also has to play, because National Treasury is a department that is transversal and therefore will affect each and every department. So I think we also need to deal with that. There's COGTA, for example, having been to local government elections recently and having had to face a lot of service delivery protests before that. And here has been mentioned, I think it was Kosatu who mentioned the issue of home affairs. It could have been mentioned by the other stakeholders as well, which is a critical department, but also seems to be understaffed whenever you find it. And in fact, there are towns that do not even have the office. So the towns, small towns like your Takastad, Hofmeer and others have to move to other towns. And when they have traveled to other towns for services, they find that in fact, servers are down for the whole day, or they find that there's just one official serving thousands of people from all those surrounding towns. And yes, the other area that I can talk to is the area of decision making. Of course, there is no decision that can be taken baselessly. You have to be responsible as you take decisions. You have to make sure that this is a public sector. When decisions are taken, they are taken for the majority of the people of this country. And therefore, when you make a decision to change something, you must be cognizant of the fact that you're not changing it for a few, but you're changing it for the majority of the people. At this point, I want to give over to the chairpersons that are here present. I have seen that Honorable Dikeli Mahlangu is on the platform. Honorable Maswangani is also on the platform. Honorable Yunus is also on the platform. Can we get comments from the honorable leaders? Yunus?
Chair, did you call on Honorable Karim?
Yes, but I started
Sorry?
with,
What's that?
in terms of the agenda, honorable members, it is that time when the chairpersons have to make some concluding remarks. So I was calling on all of you who are currently on the platform. Yourself, Yunus, there's Dix, and there's Joe. You can go first, Dix.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Chairperson. I'm back on the platform. I also want to appreciate the presentations, all of them, and also welcome the comment by Mr. Swanepoel from Treasury. He said exactly what I expected him to say, because he couldn't respond in details out of the cuff. But there's a session on Friday for Treasury to respond on issues that has been raised. And I think the responses will be informed, because they'll go back to Treasury as a team and look at the presentation, the concerns that has been presented, the recommendations and proposals. So we will hear from them, and hopefully the stakeholders will be following on their responses and hear how Treasury is responding. But also from the part of from us as the committees, the two committees, I think we are with you, we hear what you're saying, and you also speak the language that we've been speaking. We understand your concerns, and this is the concerns. These are our concerns as well. Thank you, Chairperson. If I can request that as all the two chairpersons have commented and closed the meeting, that members of the Select Committee on Appropriation, they must stay on the line. Please don't leave the meeting, because we have another meeting to deal with. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairperson. Just very quickly from my side, just some observations, right? These are things we should mediate within the committee on Friday and Tuesday when we process the report. The first observation, Chairperson, is that, like Comrade Dikeli said, it's good that people are coming to our committee. I know it's an immensely frustrating thing for them, because they raise the same issues year in and year out, and we don't act on them in the way they want. And it's difficult, because I think in a sense it reflects that we ourselves as Parliament and the government and the ANC as a whole are not moving fast enough on dealing with the issues, never mind the complexities and difficulties of the almost, I don't know what word to use here, surrealistic situation we're in. It's so unreal where we are. So, and there's no easy answers, obviously, but it's just that I think that it's tiresome that the civil society actors come here and keep repeating the same things, and we never seem on our side to be able to act on those things and persuade the executive to do so. So many of the things said today, regrettably, have been said before, Chairperson. And we're saying the same things we've said before. And we need to get out of this impasse, Chairperson, because soon the few people that are appearing before our committee will shrink away. As it is, there are key stakeholders that are not here. And yet on the other hand, Chairperson, I hope we'll all agree, like never before, frankly, maybe in the first 3-4 years after the democracy came about, and we ever needed civil society like we do now. We're all in this boat together. Never mind all our differences. There's surely certain common things that would bind us. And without civil society as a parliament, we are meaningless, really. So we need to find ways outside of this exchange with the civil society stakeholders on what we do to avoid the same situation repeated in February and October next year. So I would like to suggest, Chairperson, that we put this issue on the agenda, obviously for our respective study groups, but also for the committee to process. Because it's like, you know, same old in slightly different form. Apart from that, I want to repeat what Comrade Dikaleri says, that just to remind our colleagues here, in fact, all of them are familiar with us, but on Friday, what will happen, obviously, is that Treasury will give a more considered reply, having looked at your written and oral representations. Then what will happen is civil society, you will be asked to reply. Then we give Treasury a chance to reply to you. So both sides have been thoroughly heard. It's only after then that we engage with you and then process our thoughts over the weekend. We also want to remind you yet again, it will make life easier for the chairs, but especially the research staff. They do the initial drafts. And we keep saying, rather than us summarizing your main points, all of your full submissions appear on the website in some form or another, or they're available via the secretaries from any person interested from the public. But the important thing is that you summarize between half a page and 1 page the key points you want us to put in the report. And usually what happens is the staff more or less present, as long as it's within a reasonable number of words, Chairperson, what you as stakeholders say, we just edit and so on. So it will be very good if by 10 a.m. on Friday, all of you who made submissions present between half a page and 1 page of what you'd like to be in the report. Thank you, Chairpersons.
Okay, Comrade Joseph.
Okay, Chairperson, I fully agree with what the other chairpersons have said, Comrade Karim and Comrade Dikeledi, in terms of their observation and also the way forward that Treasury will be coming here on this platform on Friday to respond to all what stakeholders and members have raised. So I fully agree with the observations of the other two chairpersons. Thanks very much, Chairperson. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, honorable members. I think this brings us to the end, as the chairpersons have already spoken, and there is some advice that is given here in terms of what the various stakeholders can do on Friday or even before that. And we will meet with you on Friday. Thank you so much. The meeting is adjourned.
Ms. Abraham, it's Alan. Can I just say something quickly?
Okay, announcement, Alan.
Thanks, Chair. It's just the Standing Committee on Finance is meeting 6 o'clock this evening, from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. It's with National Treasury on the annual report. I will send the link for the meeting in the next 15 or 20 minutes. And I'll also send through an updated presentation and research brief during the course of the afternoon. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Alan. That's it for finance. Cheers, everybody. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Malibongwe.
Igama lamakhosikazi.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, everybody.
Albongwe. Albongwe.
Igama lamakhosikazi.
Oh, kodwa uphume khoneni.
Power chere kabasadi.
Ngiyayibona Elina ye.
When they want to abuse women, they do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lubabalo, are you on the platform? Can you flag the
Yes, Chairperson. Yes, Chairperson, I'm on the platform, Chair. Good morning, Chairperson, and good morning, honorable members.
Good morning.
Yes, as I continue to flag the agenda, Chairperson, I can confirm that the committee is forming a quorum, Chair.